Good morning in whatever world that we're in now. Trump's America round 2. Fascism is here. Oh, I need to start more chipper. No. We're actually going to push through on that. Welcome to the show. This is Dan Corder in the morning. South Africa is a movie. This is The Watch Party. This is your weekday morning news podcast. It's a real podcast 5 days a week and 1 day a week we put it on YouTube. Today, we're going to be talking about what Trump round 2 means for South Africa. You may have seen that the Rand has already tanked in the last 24 hours. Every single one of your South African Rands is less valuable than it was. You may be thinking, some Americans, particularly Republicans in the Republican Congress, were very upset with South Africa for taking that case and winning that case against Israel on the Palestinians and Gaza's behalf in the International Court of Justice. Are we going to face recriminations for that now that Trump is there? You may have heard about something called AGOA. You may have heard about South African jobs being on the line because of new American foreign policy now that Trump's republicanism is back in power. So we're going to talk about all of that. And the other thing we're going to talk about is that absolute mess of a Stop the Bela Bill rally, which just looked like an apartheid revival cosplay event. It was literally like apartheid con in visual. Don't get angry with me, but frankly, there was the Oranje, there was the Blanje, and there was the blow there. There was the blue of the DA, there was the specific bright orange of the old apartheid flag of various protesters. Steve Hofmeyr was there, one of the last Horcruxes of apartheid, I think it's fair to say, and then the Blanje was most of the DA people, although they definitely tried to make the one or two black people that they could get there, they tried to make them sit at the front of the pictures. So we're going to talk about all of that and the rage that they tried to create about the Bela Bill and what that means for South Africa's politics, because a lot of people have been incredibly upset by that whole rally and how it looked and what the DA called for. And it wasn't just the DA, by the way. Gayton McKenzie was there too with the Patriotic Alliance. So chew on that one, Gayton superfans. But we're going to talk about it and what it might mean for the GNU, because a lot of people have been saying, how, after this, considering all of this, can you have a government of national unity with the ANC and the DA in the same camp? And remember, the Bela Bill was allegedly one of the red lines that the DA said that if it was crossed, the GNU couldn't happen. Well, I don't think the GNU is in any danger of folding, but we're going to talk about that in the context of this extraordinary moment at the Voortrekker monument earlier this week in South Africa. Before then, though, let's get to the WhatsApp line. People who discovered the podcast in the last little week, maybe discovered it from the first ever YouTube that we put out a week ago, have just found out about becoming a recorder, because we use a WhatsApp line on this old phone of ours. That's your way to get in touch with the show. And we play voice notes and read out messages every single day. And as I said, you can catch Dan Corder in the morning, Monday to Friday, early in the morning on every single podcast streamer. And we're doing it once a week on YouTube, maybe more if you'd like it more. So if you want to become a recorder and actually contribute to this community and be on the show, because the show isn't me talking to you, it's a dialogue. It's us talking to each other. If you want to be on the show, the number is 0607 613 436. And a lot of people absolutely loved meeting Wandile last week. Wandile is just one of our lovely listeners, a recorder from the community who you can go check the last video or that podcast if you're listening to the podcast. Basically tried to talk about the state of the nation through Klingon. A Star Trek concocted language from sci-fi, and even tried to get me to pronounce correctly and apparently I did not get it right, but apparently tried to get me to pronounce a Klingon phrase about uselessness and how the Empire sees you, and the thing that the only thing you're famous for, notable for, known for is your uselessness. And people were saying, please, can we get a voice note from Wandile? Well, we did. Here it is.
Hey Dan, I hope you're well. One delay here. Sorry, I didn't have anything profound to share except for two quick stories. I'm a teacher, and one of my students came to me just now and said, "Sir, do you listen to Dan Corder in the morning by any chance?" I said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "Sir, did you send it?" "Yep, that was me," I said to him. He says, "Yeah, no, so I just knew it would probably be you because you're into that Star stuff. I sell myself as a Star Wars fan of the year, but underneath this jersey, I wear Star Trek gear as well." And then one of my friends from Pretoria messaged me as well, and he said, "No, it could only have been you." And in his words, when I asked him how he knew it was me, he said, "I saw the thing and immediately knew that only one chef cooks with that sauce." I thought that was quite awesome. Anyway, nothing profound to share. I just want to give you a quick how's it, and cheers. Keep doing what you do, man, and I'll be listening in. Bye.
Wandile, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much to whoever also listens to Dan Quarter in the Morning, who went up and approached their teacher. Really, really special and lovely. Then I want to play one more quick voice note from Shanaz. So we were talking earlier this week on the podcast about what Floyd Shivambu and it seems the MK Party want to do in terms of changing the way that our government and our democracy runs to a parliamentary sovereignty system. And I spoke about the real dangers of that I really didn't like, and that obviously became a defense of what we currently have, which is a constitution first, constitutionally created country, constitutionally rooted democracy. And Shanaz made a really good, really important point about how the constitution makes space for many people to live their truth and explore and enjoy their freedoms and make parts of South African life, the parts of South African life that they want to have in their lives, particularly talking about Muslim marriages and conceptions of marriage. Listen to this.
Hey Dan, thanks for another super interesting show. Firstly, thank you for teaching us all how to correctly pronounce sovereignty. Like you, I'm a huge fan of our constitution, and I find the timing of this conversation very, very interesting. Sort of the discussion about the constitutional order and parliamentary sovereignty, because it comes hot on the heels of Muslim marriages being recognized in South Africa, which would have not happened were it not for our constitution. So, in this case, we have a minority community enjoying such privilege and such rights, which is quite amazing, like for just anywhere in the world. And I think that makes South Africa quite unique. But for me, it's more than just the recognition and the protections that the Constitution offers, because I think it also impacts on a sociological level, because it allows people or a community, to have a diverse experience and also have diverse expression in our country. So, for example, you'll have people perhaps with more austere views and, wanting to adopt more austere practices. Maybe you find men and women that are more comfortable with entering into polygamous marriages, for instance. But then conversely, you have people who aren't comfortable with that at all and who perhaps adopt a less traditional view. And so the Constitution allows for that space, for that breathing room. But then in our day-to-day lives, that means we also perhaps come into contact with people from the same faith community, but that have very different expressions and very different experiences. And I think this can help us think of communities and people in more complex ways and hopefully not fall into kind of stereotypes. Anyway, very interesting topic, and thanks for the great show. Have a good one. Bye.
Shanaz, I think that is such an important point, and that's why I love the WhatsApp line. So 0607 613 436. Let's talk about the US election very quickly, because Donald Trump has won. Shocked but not surprised. America did it before. Americans the last time, particularly liberal media, were like, this is not who we are. This is not who we are. Well, it turns out this is definitely what at least half of you are, America. And the project of your country has created a fascist dominant political force that is very dangerous, very bigoted, very awful, very male skewed. And the rest of the world is going to suffer. I said this on the TV yesterday. I said this on the podcast yesterday. The fundamental sadness about the American election system is that because America is the most powerful country in the world, the most powerful democracy in the world, and the most influential, it really does matter to the rest of us. I've been feeling a sense of foreboding and doom about climate change in general, but what Trump feels about climate change and what he wants his America to do, or rather not do, to try and combat climate change affects the whole world and is going to speed up so much of the damage to our earth and is such an existential threat to so many people, particularly poorer people, particularly people in the global south, particularly people in poorer nations. And so the American election really matters. And so what I want to talk about is what we have already seen from the Trump presidency, just in him getting elected, and what it might mean for South Africa in the coming months and years directly. So you may have noticed that the rand tanked yesterday relative to the dollar. This is not surprising at all. This often happens when dominant, very powerful currencies or when dominant, very powerful countries in the world, when something surprising happens or something shell-shocking or something that can fundamentally change the way a country runs, like an election where one party in person is replaced by another, it creates an enormous amount of uncertainty. And when there is uncertainty, because investors have an influence over how much a currency has value, they become conservative, they become risk averse, and they pull investments or don't do investments. And when that happens, often smaller emerging markets, which means poorer, less well-off countries, they suffer because investors go to safe bets, and safe bets, bets feel safer, investments feel safer when they're in bigger countries. And so that has already happened. There's been, weakening of the rand by a significant margin very, very quickly. And although that doesn't mean anything immediately day to day in South Africa, it obviously has long-term consequences for exporters, importers, businesses, and ultimately the value of the rand, which means the value of the money we have, which means the currency and wealth going around in our economy, which will have long-term effects. But it might stabilize. And that's often what happens too. When there's a big market, when there's a big shock, the market reacts and then it can bounce back very, 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 very fast. But here's the thing about a Trump presidency that is incredibly unnerving and worrying for South Africa specifically. There are many reasons to worry that Trump's America will lash out against South Africa, and directly and indirectly. So firstly, as you know, Donald Trump is a big isolationist. He's an America first kind of guy. He always threatens huge tariffs on imports into America. And tariffs and making it more expensive to trade internationally has the effect of isolating that economy, which means it's harder to trade with it, it's harder to get goods from it, and it's harder to send goods to it. And South Africa really needs access to major markets like the American market. And so immediately, if Trump goes about on a big tariff wave to try and put America first, and that affects South Africa, there's a lot of businesses and a lot of jobs in South Africa that rely on selling and exporting to the United States of America who will not be able to compete anymore, may not even be able to really make any profit at all, may actually run at a loss if they try to continue to export to the United States of America. So that's bad. The second thing is AGOA. AGOA is the African Growth and Opportunity Act, and that is an agreement between the United States and particularly South Africa, which stimulates trade and makes trade very easy between us and the United States. It accounts for tens of thousands of South African jobs and a lot of wealth and trade. And you might remember that many of us were really worried when the United States of America was taking issue with South Africa for taking Israel to court in the International Court of Justice for the incredible, awful harm and damage and pain and cruelty being inflicted by the Israeli Defense Force on the people of Gaza, the Palestinians, that suddenly America was getting upset with us, because America has a powerful Zionist agenda behind all of its politicians and all of its politics. And America was getting upset, and people were starting to talk about will AGOA survive? Will South Africa suffer direct consequences of American displeasure over our country standing up for the plight of helpless Palestinians? And at the time when this was happening, there was a bit of a kerfuffle because a couple of members of the U.S. Congress, basically agreed to do an investigation into South Africa's and a consideration of South Africa's political and economic ties with America, with the consideration of maybe punishing us or cutting us off. And they didn't really go anywhere. But under a Trump presidency, I know that a lot of people don't see a big difference between the Republicans and the Democrats on their policy on Israel and Palestine. But Kamala Harris's presidency, a continuation of the Democrats' rule, would probably have meant a continuation of the status quo, the way that we already trade with and deal with politically, deal with the United States of America. And we seem to have got away with it in terms of getting away, or like escaping and dodging retribution from America over our country's stance of standing up for Palestinians. And then Trump got elected. And now we don't know, because many of Trump's support base, a lot of his donors, a lot of his public supporters are militant Christian supremacists. These are people who believe that more important than individual rights and freedoms, more important than human equality and fairness, that their version of Christianity must dominate and reign supreme across America and the world. That's the way that American pastors managed to persuade American Christians, many of them, to vote for Donald Trump, a man who is so sinful, contemptible, and so not Jesus-like or God-like or good Christian-like in any way. And there's so much evidence for that. That's how they persuaded Christians to vote for Trump, Christian Americans, because they said, but Trump is a means to an end. Trump is a means to us creating a more Christian-dominant, our version of Christian-dominant America. And those Christians, those specific American Christian supremacists, are militant Zionists and deeply Islamophobic and feel nothing for the plight of Palestinian people. And so with that kind of energy, and remember, Trump, it's not just that Trump won the White House, it's that in the different parts of the American ruling system, the Republicans also have majorities, like in the Senate. If that is the energy, the MAGA energy about Israel and Palestine, South Africa could face some very serious political and economic ramifications of what we have already done and what we continue to do. Our court case at the ICJ against Israel over genocide that is happening right now, it could really, we could become a punching bag for the American political system in a way that it almost already happened. So these are very, very alarming times. And I think we need to understand how much Trump matters. There's a voice note on the podcast, Danny, for those of you who only watch on YouTube. It's an American. And he said that other Americans don't understand that the American presidency is a world leadership position. It obviously is. The influence of America is so enormous. And there are direct and indirect ways that South Africa is going to be affected. And there's so much uncertainty now about what Trump is going to do. It's an incredibly stressful time. So, we've spoken about that. Let's talk about this Anti-BELA Act march that happened on Tuesday. So, quick refresher. The Bela Bill looks set to reshape South Africa's education system. The main point of the Bela Bill is to create more justice in schools. That's actually, if you really want to cut through the noise, that's what it is. Because the diagnosis that the Bela Bill is responding to, the diagnosis of our education system, is that even decades after apartheid, decades into our democracy, many schools remain untransformed, many schools remain exclusionary, many schools remain absolutely unwilling or uninterested or unable to welcome many different kinds of South African students, and many schools look and sound and operate in exactly the same way as they did before 1994. And that's a problem. And the reasoning, so then people went, why is this the case? And the reasoning was school governing bodies, which are formed by community of that school, whether it be teachers, principals, learners, parents, whatever. School governing bodies were given quite a lot of responsibility to transform their schools and open them up and make sure that schools became accessible to all kinds of South African young kids who all have a right to basic education. That was their job. And 2.5, 3 decades in, it became very clear that school governing bodies in many places had failed in their mandate. And so the Bela Bill gives power to the Department of Basic Education to make sure that school governing bodies are doing what they're supposed to do. It's not school takeover. It's not school capture. That's not what it is all. That's just propaganda branding that you may have heard. It's not school capture. It's actually going, okay, many schools to this point are not providing kids their basic right or their right to basic education. And so here are a bunch of ways that we're going to make schools more accessible. And here are a bunch of processes that school governing bodies need to go through that will be checked by the Department of Basic Education to make sure that school governing bodies are just doing what they're supposed to do, just fulfilling their mandate. It really is as simple as that. And we've already done a video on YouTube on the Bela Bill, and we fought a lot of misinformation and disinformation around it. But that's essentially, truly, you can go watch it if you want to hear more. That's essentially, truly what the Bela Bill is about. There are two parts of the Bela Bill that have caused a lot of controversy and a lot of upset about admissions and about language policies. And so when Ramaphosa signed the Bela Bill into law, because it's the Bela Act now, he said that there would be 3-4 months consultation over those two parts of the Bela Act. So they haven't been implemented yet. The first one is about admissions, making sure that school governing bodies admit all kinds of applicants and don't prioritize applicants who look and sound the same and come from the same background as all the other applicants have ever done, all the other school children have ever done in the history of those schools. And the second one is language. And this is where it gets messy, because to be crystal clear, the suggested policy on language for schools is that if there is a school that could include and provide the right to basic education to more learners in their area by teaching in another language, not instead of adding a language, the Department of Basic Education can step in to help that to happen, to help that process happen and create potentially 2 languages of instruction at a school for different groups of learners. And that's a really sensible, obvious thing. We are suffering an education crisis. There are not enough good schools. There are not enough good teachers. There are not enough schools to get all the kids in at all. And we need to make sure that schools are catering for as many kids as possible in their areas of South Africa. It's a very reasonable idea. And the government has been very reasonable about the objections to it. What you may have heard is that this is an attack on Afrikaans, to destroy Afrikaans culture, to wipe Afrikaans as a language of instruction off the map. That is not true. There is no replacement whatsoever. But you may have heard the other thing, because there's been a very concerted campaign to try and drum this up from the Democratic Alliance, Solidariteit, AfriForum, the Freedom Front Plus, Patriotic Alliance was at this rally, this march on Tuesday. But that's just not actually what is happening. That's not what the Bela Act says at all. I mean, it's just, I don't know how to say it any other way. It's just not what it does. Anyway, there's been a lot of twirling and shouting about all of these different things, and that led to this Anti-BELA Act march on Tuesday, where there was the DA and Freedom Front Plus and the Patriotic Alliance and AfriForum and Solidarity. And as I said, if you've seen the pictures, the old apartheid flag, you could have put that photograph at any time in history, in like the last 100 years of South Africa, including in color. If you colorized all of the old photos, it's what it looked like. Bright orange, blue, and a whole bunch of white people. And Steve Hofmeyr. I don't know if you saw the tweet about it. It was such a good tweet. It went viral. It was like, that was a real journalism tweet. That was like from the Rudy Klaaby School of Journalism tweet. It said something like, Steve Hofmeyr, noted homophobe or anti-LGBT activist who has sung Die Stem before and sung a song about black people using the K word in it, performs at this rally. Like that is good journalism. That is everything you need to know about that moment. So this rally happened, and it was the same old, same old. They're trying to destroy Afrikaans. They're trying to wipe Afrikaans out, although they did a cute thing, like a little smart strategy thing that often these smaller parties do. They say it's about protecting minority or native languages, but they really only care about Afrikaans. They're not fighting for the rights, explicitly at least, of any other minority language. But that's what they were doing. And it was interesting because, okay, for a few reasons. Firstly, yes, there was someone there with a Voortrekker, which is literally the flag of like Afrikaner white supremacy. And that person, I will say, was ejected after people called security guards and said that's not what this event is about. And I'm going to be completely fair there. That was a good thing to do. But I have to say, you attract people based on what you do. You are responsible for your disciples, is what I'm trying to say. I know that people follow each other for different reasons, and ultimately, public figures can't be solely or like completely comprehensively responsible for all the people who support them and follow them. But I'm just saying, no Voortrekker just arrives at Voortrekker don't even arrive at rugby matches in Perth. It takes a specific kind of event and a specific kind of branding and modeling and positioning to see that. And to have someone go, oh yeah, I'll bring that. That makes sense in this context. So yeah, I guess, bar is on the floor, kudos for actually ejecting that person. But at the same time, you attract what you attract. You attract what you attract. And the pictures, oranje, blanje, blauw. So there's that. And a lot of South Africans were, I think, rightfully outraged once they saw these images. And a lot of South Africans were saying, how could you let the DA into the GNU? Although I will remind you that according to all of the kind of rumors and suggestions from other political parties, even far left ones as they call themselves, who are completely anti-DA, they would have worked with them to get rid of the ANC. So there's a lot of point scoring and political opportunism happening here, but I think a lot of people have now been saying, how can the DA be in the GNU? How can the GNU survive? And I know the GNU will survive this because it's working for everybody. Sure, they can have these outbursts, and this is what a competitive democracy is like when you have coalition partners who disagree. I know that the GNU will survive this. It's working for the ANC ministers. It's working for the DA ministers. It's working for all of the different ministers. They're very, very happy. The parties are very, very happy with the platform of being ministers and being able to show that they are doing well as a means of showing potential supporters and voters that it's worth voting for us because we actually cause change, we get into power and can do good things. So I don't think this is no threat to the GNU. But it is very difficult now. John Steenhuisen then came out and said this isn't an anti-Cyril Ramaphosa march. This is a march against the Bela Act. We'll take it all the way to the Constitutional Court. That is all fine. But you need to think very carefully about how if they were going to take it to the Constitutional Court anyway, why did they do this march at all? It was a political performance to rally and attract voters. And the DA has, particularly since the days of after Mmusi Maimane was evicted, people will say he wasn't evicted. I mean, the public record will maybe show, but let's be honest. Since Maimane was booted, the DA has made a concerted effort to appeal to smaller groups, minority groups. That in itself is not a problem. But they're twirling and flexing for what often looks, sounds, walks, quack like a duck, seems to be apartheid sentimentality, Afrikaner nationalism. They have been doing that over and over and over again. I mean, they got a big shock in 2019 and other elections when the Freedom Front Plus took some votes from them. They're trying to cover their right flank. I get that. That's the performance politics of why they did it. But people are now saying, and I agree with them, that this has put Ramaphosa in a really tough spot. Because to what degree can Ramaphosa now negotiate on those two parts of the Bela Act 4 and 5 about admissions and language, given that the public performance of resistance to the Bela Act was so apartheid coded, was so apartheid symboled, was so colored in those two very, very, very specific colors by very, very specific groups of people. In fact, one of the spokespeople said the last time we protested like this was 1994. Why was that 1994 the last time you protested? What were you protesting in 1994? In your bright orange, you know? And because the face, the representation, the look and feel, the image in people's minds when they think about those who disagree with the Bela Act now looks like that, I think it does make it much harder for Ramaphosa to negotiate to find a different resolution. I think it does put him in a bind where if he finds a different resolution, like a softer version of the language and admissions policies or drops them or whatever, he's going to be painted as, you sold out to those guys, you negotiated with those guys and you agreed with them, you gave them space, those people who made those choices. Because I know the DA and others will say, oh, we didn't pick the orange, we just happened to be there in our blue. You definitely knew beforehand and you were definitely fine with it. Definitely. Because you arrived and you sat and you were happy and, you know, Steve Hofmeyer and whatever. And so for me, this is an interesting move by the DA because it puts a level of tension on these Bela Act negotiations, which for me leaves Ramaphosa having to go, cool, fine, we tried. And it's going to go all the way to the Constitutional Court. But if the DA keeps doing stuff like this, you have to wonder how they are ever going to grow beyond the plateau that they're now on, which is around 20% with no space or real prospect to grow bigger. Because they are consistently providing new evidence to people that does not beat the allegations. But what do you think? Let me know on the WhatsApp line, 0607 613 436 to become a recorder. We won't see you tomorrow, but we can hear you, and you can hear us tomorrow on any and all of your favorite streaming sites. Dan Caught in the Morning returns for the Friday morning edition of the show. Have a beautiful Thursday.